Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and I'm excited to bring you this first episode of a new series we're hosting on the podcast called Coffee with Kirk. And this features our good friend, Kirk Walden. And Kirk has been a part of the pregnancy help movement for a long time, and he'll give you some of his background in this first episode. But he's been doing a lot of writing and a lot of just sharing encouragement to the pregnancy help movement. And so we wanted to bring this to our podcast listeners. And so grab a cup of coffee and enjoy this first episode of Coffee with Kirk.
Hey, this is Kirk Walden, and welcome to our first episode of Coffee with Kirk, part of the Pregnancy Help Podcast. It is great to be with you. And you know what I want? I want us to have a casual conversation here on a regular basis about building a culture within your center. Because as I've thought about this over the years, and I'll give you a little bit of my background in a moment, I really believe that before anything else we do, we build a culture. And I know you're already doing this in so many ways, but I want to help you along that path and kind of have a conversation back and forth. And I'll give you my email address later so you can communicate with me and we can talk about what to do in future episodes. Because I really believe that building an engaging, effective culture within our ministry and offices, that's what attracts those we most want to reach, and it wins their hearts is what it does. And so that's what I want to talk about in this podcast. Like I said, it's going to be a casual conversation. I'll stumble over my words, which is fine. But at the same time, I want you to know that all you need to do is sit back, maybe grab a beverage, whether it's coffee or something else, sit back and relax and listen either alone or with your staff. And let's just kind of walk through this together. I'll tell stories at some point, and maybe you can tell me your stories. You can give me that kind of feedback, and maybe I'll share them in future episodes. But as I think about building a culture within our center or within our ministry, this is the foundation, because we can have all the excellence in the world, and we want that. We can have all the professionalism in the world, and we want that. We can make sure we are legally doing all the right things that we need to do, and we definitely want that. We want all of those things. But those things are only effective if we have built a culture that wins and engages those we see, and even our donors and supporters. If we can build that culture, people want to be around us. It's when our client or patient goes out and somebody asks them about their visit and they go, you know, it was tough because we had to walk through some tough stuff, but I can't imagine going through it with anybody else because they are so real. They're so genuine, and I already love them. If we can create that culture, we win the culture. We talk about creating a culture of life. Great. You know how we do that? We build this foundation of creating a winning and engaging culture. So that's what I want to talk about. That's what's got me excited at this point in my life, and I can't wait to get started. So a little bit about me. If you don't know me, I've got 30 years in this work. I was an executive director from 1991 to about 2000. I began working with centers through a publication that I started in about 2001. And during that time, I was also training centers and fundraising events. And in 2009, Heartbeat came to me and they asked if they could partner up with a publication I had, and we began to do that. And then in 2014, I came on staff with Heartbeat and was on staff for 7 years, working in the development realm. I was helping ministries with their development and coaching boards and doing all of those things, which was a blast. Took a break and went back to volunteer status with Heartbeat for a few years. And now here I am partnering again through this podcast. So again, great to be with you. I'm just going to talk and hopefully you'll gain something by it. And hopefully I'll gain from you as you connect back with me. But as I think about success in our centers and building this culture, it can be this giant thing that seems almost impossible. How do you build a culture? What are all the books that we need and all that? Let's start very simply with one thing we can do, one trait that we can develop, which will automatically begin to win the hearts of our clients. Not only that, it's going to build, in fact, even more important, it builds a culture within us that our clients will see and it'll be so palatable, they'll look at us and go, you know what? Whatever they've got, give me some of what they're having. So that's what I want to start with, this one character trait. And it comes from Hebrews 3:13. I'll tell you a little story. When my kids were little, I was a single dad for several years during this time, and I would drive my kids to school. And as I did, I would talk about this verse from Hebrews where it says, the writer says, but encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin, and none of your hearts be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin, is what one translation says. And that's what I want to get into in a second. But I'd kid with my kids, if I'm allowed to say that. I'd kid with my kids, and I would say, hey, we got to encourage each other, right? So it says day after day. So yesterday was today, yesterday, right? And they say, yeah. So we could have been encouraging yesterday, and today is today, and tomorrow is today, tomorrow. And we'd go back and forth on this stuff. And my hope is that I built a culture of encouragement within our family because we were going through a tough time. I was a single dad, and I would tell them, I'd say, you know what? We're not making excuses. We are going to overcome this. I know it's tough, but we don't get to make excuses. We've got to make it through. And part of that was encouraging each other. And that's what we did. I tried to instill that in them. I still try to do that today, now that they're in their 30s. And I've got two more kids that two more boys that I'm trying to do the same thing. But encouragement seemed to be a big deal to us. And I think it's a big deal to our centers. I believe it'll help us attract more clients. And I do believe that those clients will be more engaged with us as we become encouragers. So there's a huge benefit to it. But not only that, on the back end of that verse, I don't know about you, but I can get to where my heart gets a little stale with this work, where we see the same things over and over again. Maybe it's the same client who comes in and she's had 3 or 4 children by 3 or 4 different fathers, and we struggle with, are we getting through to her? Or the very hard client who doesn't want anything from us, who looks at us, says, give me my pregnancy test, I'm going out of here, I'm going to take the pills or whatever I'm going to do. And it's hard. And it can make our hearts hard when we see that over and over. But the writer of Hebrews, whether Paul or someone else, is trying to tell us with everything within their pen, folks, if you will encourage or exhort each other on a regular basis, if you make this a habit, you will not have a hardened heart. Because how can I spend my time speaking negatively about that client when it crosses my mind? Or how can I speak negatively about that person who I'm having a tough time with in the office or maybe outside the office if my focus is on encouraging? It's hard to do. It's an antidote. Encouragement is an antidote to hardened heart syndrome. If we can do this, we can change a lot of things in our center and build things in our center, because you probably already are a center of encouragement, but we can always do better, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. And I ask my question, the next question I ask is, what does this look like in real life? Is it just a bunch of empty platitudes or something like that? We always go by and say, have a great day, you're the most wonderful. That's great. But I really believe that when push comes to shove, it's simply about finding the good. It's seeing that coworker who communicates well with a client and saying, hey, I saw that. I think she really engaged with you when you said this. It's that kind of thing. It's when we choose vulnerability with a client. When we do this, we encourage her or him by allowing them to be vulnerable with us. Those types of things. It may be taking a negative and turning it into a positive. I know a lot of executive directors struggle with board attendance sometimes. Well, we could curse the poor board attendance, or we could look at our notes from meetings past and find that board member who's made, say, 12 straight meetings or 25 or whatever, many straight meetings, and choose to celebrate them. It's an encouragement for those who are doing well. And even those who aren't doing so well look at that and go, wow, if that guy can make all those meetings, or if she can make all those meetings, maybe I need to make that a priority as well. I can't guarantee you it'll change everything, but it'll at least change our heart, because I know that as an executive director, I had a board member who would miss several meetings and come to a meeting and then have tons of questions, and it would frustrate me. I wonder what would have happened if, as a young director, I would have, instead of thinking about the problem, I would have been looking at the other ones who were there every month and thanking them. So looking at it differently helps us, as well as could help them, could help some board members, or in any other situation, see their own selves differently and maybe make changes. I don't know. But I do know this, it'll help us at least. Because when we adopt a culture of encouragement, our clients and patients are going to notice. I promise you they'll notice. It's the difference between, let's say we're walking a client down for a sonogram, and we knock on the door, and Jenny opens the door, who's our sonographer, and we say, well, client, this is Jenny, and she'll be doing your ultrasound. I'm going to go ahead and hand you off, and I'll see you when you finish. Well, that's great. That's one way to do things. Or when Jenny opens that door, we could say, let me introduce you to Jenny. Let me tell you, she is the most amazing sonographer. You're going to love her. And I so look forward to hearing what happens in here in the next few minutes, because she's a great one. Y'all have a wonderful time in there, and I will be here when you get out. I didn't say that great, but you get the point. Let's focus on encouraging Jenny and encouraging our client to engage with Jenny. If we can do that, it changes everything. They see it when we're not genuine, I promise you, but because our clients aren't dummies, they know what's going on. But if we can adopt that culture and begin to build that culture, how can I build up that person in my office? And it may be somebody who you report to, and it may be somebody who reports to you. How can I be an encourager? What is that note I can write? My wife, Jen, she's a teacher, and she does so many things. She carries around gift cards. When she sees a teacher having a bad day, they get a $5 gift card to Starbucks or whatever. Those are the kind of things we can do to build a culture of encouragement. That's where the water hits the wheel, or whatever we want to say, the tire hits the pavement. Those are the real things that we can do. They will notice. Those who come in the door will notice. And I'm telling you, we've got an example. Jesus is a great example of this. Remember him and the Samaritan woman. Jen, my wife, and I are writing a book on saving Samaria. So we talk about Samaritan woman a lot. But if you go back to that moment when Jesus offers her living water, she wants that living water. And Jesus says, now go call your husband and come here. Now she's in a quandary, because she doesn't have a husband, as we know. And she may be afraid that if she tells Jesus she's not married, she doesn't get the living water. But she goes ahead and says it. She says, I have no husband. And Jesus looks at her and he says, you're right in saying I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one you are with now is not your husband. What you have said is true. Notice, Jesus, in order for her to understand he's the Messiah, has to declare things to her that he wouldn't readily know. And this is what he does right here. Because she's going to say later, I know that the Messiah is coming. And when he comes, he's going to declare all things to us, right? Well, this is the declaring. This is where she begins to get a little sign that this guy is not normal. In fact, she's going to go on to say, sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. Well, right? Of course he's a prophet, son of God. But she's beginning to pick up on it here. But what does he do? He couches this telling everything about her life within 2 compliments. First, he says, you're right in saying I have no husband. And then he closes by saying, what you have said is true. He encourages her. He compliments her. And this is his way of engaging with her so that the conversation continues and only grows until the point when later on he's going to declare for the first time in history that he is the Messiah that she's been waiting for and that the whole world has been waiting for. She gets to be the first person to hear this news. And it all begins with the living water and a compliment from Jesus to keep her engaged. Folks, when we choose to compliment, it's easy for us to say, we got to give her some truth now. I get it. Jesus did this, but he couched it within compliments. He couched it within encouragement and exhortation. You be a truth teller, young lady, because guess what? In a few minutes, you're going to go back to your people and you're going to declare that this Jew, not Samaritan, is the Messiah that they've been waiting for. I am entrusting you with a truth. But I know you're going to tell that truth. I believe in you. This is the moment when he begins to show her he believes in her. So if we can be those people, encouragers, we can change the view of a client who comes in the door. I know you have probably had a moment of encouragement. If you haven't, drop me an email. I'll leave the email address at the end here. It'll probably be in the show notes. But here's the thing. I know one thing. My life was changed by encouragement. I will never forget sitting in my junior classroom in high school when Mrs. Cannon came up behind me on my right, and she dropped the paper on my desk with an A on it. I remember the A because there weren't many of those in my high school career. But she looked at me and she says, "Kirk, you are a good writer. You need to go into journalism when you get to college." I had never really thought about that. I liked writing, but I'd never thought about it. Mrs. Cannon had me thinking about it. And guess what? I did go into journalism. I wrote for a couple of newspapers. I worked at a newspaper out of college. And when I took on the role as executive director of our pregnancy help ministry, I loved doing the newsletter. Our newsletters, I'm just going to tell you, they're pretty good. And I had a lot of executive directors who'd say, "Golly, I get your newsletter so good. Would you write mine?" Well, after I left the center, I started a publication, which I alluded to earlier, where I helped write articles for Pregnancy Center newsletter. And before I knew it, several hundred centers had signed on to this. And I began writing thank you letters, which grew into a thank you book, which you can still get on Heartbeat's website, 200 plus ways to say thank you, I believe it is. I've written several manuals. Some of them Heartbeat still has out. And not only that, I've written one book, and I've got another one on the way. And I think it all started because someone chose to encourage me. One thing we can do is encourage not only each other, because I think this is foundational to a strong ministry, but also those who come in the door. If we find ways to encourage others, we are going to find ways to engage more effectively. And I know some of us are saying, we hear this and go, "I know it's just not really who I am. It's not my nature. I'm not that person." I get it. But you know what? Some of us, including Kirk, have to work at this. But if we work at this, it becomes a habit. And habits over time become who we are. And I get emails all the time by directors and different people, staff members saying, "Hey, thank you. You're a real encouragement, and I appreciate that." I have an email that goes out every month. You can get on the list. Just email me. And it is just basically encouragement each month. I work at it, but it's becoming more and more who I am. And I really believe that if we become encouragers, we build an engaging culture which wins hearts. Heck, the writer of Hebrews tells us so. He says, we're going to win hearts because we're going to have soft hearts. So I say, let's go out there and encourage, because a crazy world out there needs what we offer. Encouragement. It's one thing we can do. It is just one. But if today we choose to be encouragers, we begin to change this wacky world in which we live. I promise you we can do it together. So, hey, thank you for joining me. If you need encouragement or just need to connect in some way, just email me at kirk@kirkwalden.com. And you can also join me for coffee on Substack, kirkwalden.substack.com. I'm writing there every week. It's free. You can subscribe, whatever you want to do. I love encouraging I love building up. I love the idea of building a culture which wins hearts. And we're going to keep talking about this in future episodes. So that's coffee for today. There's more coffee coming. And thank you for being a part of the podcast.